Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar from all of us at Deloitte and Freeman. For those of you who have just joined, can I please ask that you go on mute so we don't get any background noise? My name's David Morgan, Energy and Resources Leader at Deloitte, and I'm excited that we're working with Freeman once again as the headline sponsor for this year's awards. These awards are really important to us and to the sector. Deloitte's committed to supporting and showcasing excellence in energy, not only to the industry, but also to the wider business community and the general public. The nominations that I hope that you're all working on will showcase projects that have made an impact in your organisation and will provide best practice examples of the future of the industry. So regardless of the size of the projects, its challenges that it's overcome, successes that it may have had, and the journey that you took to get there, we really want you to share those stories. We hope that this session this afternoon will help you craft your success story into a winning entry, and we've got some top people here to help you do that. We'll be hearing soon from Elizabeth Wilson, Chair of the Judging Panel, and then from Neil Wembridge from Freeman, who will also fill us in on some final entry details. I look forward to seeing you all at the awards in August, and best of luck for your entries. I'm now going to pass over to Mike Cocken, who's going to run you through the webinar's housekeeping.
Thanks very much, David. I'm just going to quickly run through the housekeeping for today's session. Many of you are on mute. If you're not on mute, again, just a reminder to mute yourselves, just so we don't hear all that background noise. And if you've got any questions during the webinar, please email them over to energyawards@freemanmedia.co.nz. We'll try and answer them at the end of this session, but if we're unable to get to it because of time, a little bit of response, we will respond to you after the webinar. We're also recording the session so you can share it and watch it back later. And as a final reminder, that deadline to get your nomination in is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of May. Now, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Elizabeth Wellston, our chair of the judging panel, for her top tips.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everyone. I think the first thing I just wanted to say, and you've heard me say it all before, is that not just me, but I think all of the judges, it's fair to say that we really do look forward to the judging fortnight. It's always inspiring reading about the incredible people, projects and stories going on out there in the industry. A lot for us to get through, to absorb, to be weighed, assessed and debated. Debate there's plenty of when it comes to choosing the finalists, and again when we're trying to land on the winners, always a hard decision. We've got a scoring system as well, and I'll come to that when I am talking to you about one of the top tips. All of the judges are passionate about judging, and the more that you can make it easier for us, then the better the chances that you will be one of the finalists on the night. Top tips are an Energy Awards tradition. So I've collected some top tips from the judges this year, and I'll just run through those for you. Number one, always on the top of the top tips list, is read the instructions. Number two, follow the instructions. And that means completing all the sections, unless of course the instructions tell you otherwise. The entry forms have been designed to help us with our scoring process, and really does make a difference. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often it happens that we don't get all the right sections completed. So why is that important? Well, a number of reasons. We can only judge against the material that you provide us. We do have a marking system, and that's useful because it helps us ensure consistency across the judges, but also across what often are very different underlying projects within an award section. So don't do yourself a disservice by not completing a section, because all that means is that others will get scored when you don't. And that might just let down what is otherwise an excellent award entry. And finally, on that point, please don't just cut and paste from one section to another. We know that there is a bit of work in putting an entry together, but cutting and pasting, we can only score you once for any particular aspect of your entry. And if you cut and paste across sections, really that's not a lot different to not completing the section, because we can't give you a different score for the same thing. On the subject of cutting and pasting, please also don't just cut and paste in something that you've prepared for a different audience. It really does make a difference, and it helps if you've tailored your entry to the questions and the judging criteria. If you leave it to us to try and map your story back to those criteria, well, we might get it, but then again we might not, and we might draw those connections in a different way to how you would have. Which leads me to my next tip, and it's a tip that was touched on by all the judges when I canvassed their views for what should be the top tips for 2019. And I guess summing it up, we're looking for a good story told well. The telling should be evidence-based, and it should be compelling. Be concise. More is not necessarily more. Keep it focused, keep it relevant, and always come back to our judging criteria. That makes a big difference when we're doing our scoring. Also, when we've got a lot of entries to get through, if you give us a whole lot of extra information, it loses our attention. So by all means, give us what's relevant, but really do think about, is this the most relevant information I can provide? Another tip, make the story real. Personal stories add colour. Tell us about the challenges that you overcame, the mistakes you made even. Tell us what you set out to achieve. How did you define success when you started out? How did you measure success as you went through? Sometimes there's some very obvious industry metrics about how you might measure success for a particular project. But other times it's possibly going to be quite bespoke. That might be something that you have to think about in the new Wellbeing Award category. So the things that I'd suggest you think about there are, well, how's your company monitoring and measuring the initiative? How is your board looking at and thinking about the value that's being delivered? What are you reporting to them or to your senior leadership teams? How will you know when you've achieved success or when it's time to move on and do something different? What are your key stakeholders telling you about the initiative? Was it what you were expecting? These are all things that, think about. Some of them will be relevant, some of them might not, but good things to think about as you're putting your entry together. And finally, of course, tell us how it went. That might not always be the same as how you're expecting it to go. And that leads on to my next tip, which is we really, as judges, we don't have any preconceived ideas of what success looks like. That's what we want you to tell us. Explain to us how this particular initiative or this project made a difference, how it added value, what success looked like for you. At the same time, please don't oversell your entry. We don't need anything glossy or flash. Upbeat's fine, gushy is not. And of course, don't forget the evidence. One final tip, think about getting a peer review, someone who's completely independent from the project or the initiative. They might be in your company, they might be outside your company. But ask your peer reviewer, does this make sense to someone who's not already familiar with the project? And I think this is a really useful tip. Because sometimes when I know myself, when I'm involved in a project for months at a time, it's so easy to forget that people not involved in the project don't have that same deep, intimate understanding of what's involved, what the challenges have been, as I do. So, part of that peer review process is check your assumptions. How is this? Have I told all the key elements of the story? Whether you were counting, that was 10 top tips from the judges, and I'm going to stop there. But just to sum up, I think a couple of key points. Pay attention to the instructions in the entry form. Think about the elevate. So the key points. Back it up with evidence and keep it concise. I'm really looking forward to reading your entries this year. And for now, I'll hand you over to Neil for the next part of the webinar.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, Neil Wembridge here from Freeman. I organise the awards, and you can consider me your main liaison point for any questions you might have regarding the entry process and putting in an entry. So yeah, thanks again, Elizabeth, and thanking all of her fellow judges who bring their combined experience and skills to the judging table. And thanks to Deloitte and Mike and David for their support of their awards and for hosting this webinar today. So my only tip really is to ask Neil. If in doubt about anything, please get in touch and please give me a call or send me an email. I enjoy providing some advice and helping wherever I can. I've been working with the majority of those judges for the past 5 years, and so I'm starting to get a handle on what impressed them. Use me and to put questions to me as you need. The award categories, you should all be familiar with those by now. They're all up on the Energy Awards website, and they're obviously contained in this presentation. We have 2 new categories for this year, which is the Wellbeing category and Network Initiative. The Network Initiative of the Year category, just for the sake of clarification, does apply to all energy networks. So the scope is quite broad for that particular category. Someone might not have muted their microphone. If they could do that, that would be great. We just move the slides on a little bit. Okay. And to the next one. Yeah, the full judging panel of who is a judge is available up on the website also. And we do get the odd question around what if I have, or this particular project has involved one of the judges, or if I have worked with one of the judges previously. We have some very rigorous conflict of interest procedures and policies in place for the judges. So I can assure you that where potential conflicts do arise, then those judges will step out of judging that particular category. So those are managed very, very professionally. Moving onwards, the key dates. The first key date you should be paying close attention to is the 22nd of May. That's when all of the entries should be received by Freeman, by myself or one of the team here at Freeman. We're very relaxed about how we received your entries, whether they're on a USB stick or whether they're emailed or via a Dropbox or some sort of file sharing application. We're perfectly happy to receive them in any way that you would like to send them to us. Moving on. Why enter? There are myriad of reasons why you might want to enter. Personally, I think it's really important to share these stories of excellence and success. It really does. I mean, I'm very personally aware of some of the excellent work completed in the energy sector by very, very many people. and some of the excellent people within the energy sector. And so I'm very keen on all of these stories of success. And of course, there are a large number out there, to share these as much as we can. So I appreciate all of the efforts that you're all going to in preparing these entries and getting your entries in. And finally, probably just to reiterate, my point, feel free to give me a call, whether it's a question about which category or how to tell the story or what sort of elements of a story to include or not. Again, I'm more than happy to share the benefit of my experience with you all. So that sort of, I think, wraps up my session. Have we had any questions coming through on the email? Okay. I've got a few questions which I call questions that I'm often asked. And the first one is, am I eligible to enter? Well, if you're in doubt about an eligibility in a particular category, the first thing you should do is give me a call or send me an email, and I'll help you out with that. Another question is, can I enter the same project/initiative in more than one category? The answer to that is absolutely you can, but please bear in mind that the separate categories are looking for different things, so you'll need to tell a different story in each of those entries, and it's very important to tell the story in the right way, so that, for example, if you had a very technology focused initiative and you were thinking about entering into innovation and energy technology, those two categories are actually looking for two very different things. And so it'd be worthwhile having a conversation with myself just to clarify the angles to be taken. Elizabeth?
Sorry, can I just interrupt on that? I think that's a really good point that you're making there, and it sort of links back to some of the top tips that I was talking about, which is, really look at the criteria in the entry form. The entry forms set that out quite well. So it is very much about help us match your story to what we're looking for when we're scoring.
Yep. Absolutely. Another question I get asked is, does it have to be sort of glossy and prepared by a professional PR company? Absolutely not, is the answer to that. This really is just about telling a story and conveying a message. So however you do that is absolutely fine. It certainly does not need to be what I call glossy.
But back it up with the evidence.
But back it up with the evidence, absolutely. Listen to Elizabeth's tips previously about that. Another question that I get asked is, hang on, my project isn't a particularly big project. And what I would say about that is that it doesn't matter. There are very many excellent stories out there relating to smaller initiatives. And we've had plenty of finalists and winners who've had a great story on a small scale. So the judges do not give any special attention to scale, and they're more than equipped to compare a big project to a small project on their relative merits. So don't worry about that. So that really covers off my sort of questions that I get asked often. Anything else, Mike? If not, back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, once again, if you do have any questions about the awards or your entry or any way you can get involved or whether you'd like to attend, do email energyawards@freemanmedia.co.nz and they can point you in the right direction. That's all the time we've got for this webinar. So thank you very much to Elizabeth, Neil and David. We'll make this webinar available later on the Energy Excellence Awards website, and we look forward to seeing you in August. Thank you very much.